fresh developments aimed squarely at Moscow. NATO chief Mark Rutte has unveiled a new mission designed to deter any more Russian drone incursions into NATO countries. Have a listen.
NATO is launching Eastern Sentry to bolster our posture even further along our eastern flank. This military activity will commence in the coming days and will involve a range of assets from allies including Denmark, France, United Kingdom, Germany and others. In addition to more traditional military capabilities, this effort will also feature elements designed to address the particular challenges associated with the use of drones.
Well, this comes, of course, just 2 days after Russia violated Poland's airspace in its war against Ukraine. And in the next hour for you, the UN Security Council is expected to hold an emergency meeting on that Russian drone incursion. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has declared that Wednesday's incursion was no mistake. And his comments coming after US President Donald Trump suggested the airspace violation could have been an accident. Now, Nick Paton-Walsh joins me now for more. So, Nick, bolstering their defence, how so? Just explain what that means in real terms.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the precise flight patterns or geographical intensity of all of this, but NATO are saying this will start initially with a focus on Poland. They are outlining some of the assets involved, which include 2 F-16s from Denmark and an anti-air frigate, 3 Rafale jets from France and 4 Eurofighters from Germany. The UK also part of this as well. Now, we also know that Poland is putting in a kind of restriction on their airspace on that eastern border that runs alongside Belarus and Ukraine, from which we know over 20 drones would have flown. And NATO says that this Operation Eastern Sentry, modeled, they say, on Baltic Sentry, which was put in place after alleged sabotage of undersea cables in the Baltic Sea by those close to Russia. This is essentially an extension of that. Now, I should point out that this original incursion of drones was in fact tackled by a combination of Polish F-16s and Dutch F-35 jets. So there are a lot of NATO assets already on standby in this particularly sensitive area to tackle the incursions that have been there in the past. Remember, this is not the first time that we have seen Russian aircraft make incursions or fly close to NATO airspace, but it is the first time we've seen something of this magnitude that has been shot down. More details we're learning, Issa, though, about that incursion involve it being 21 separate drones that they believe were launched initially from Russia. I understand that you can adapt some of the drones being used here. The Gerber Shahid type drone can fly further with a bigger fuel tank if you don't put explosives in it. And we understand that some of the drone debris found doesn't suggest necessarily they were carrying explosives. But the outcome of this now is a lot of questions about whether this was an intentional Russian move. Now, we've heard from President Trump saying that, it could have been a mistake, I quote here, but regardless, I'm not happy about having anything to do with that whole situation, but hopefully it's going to come to an end. He has immediately seen a bit of pushback from the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, somebody who, he has been relatively close to, saying they wish it was a mistake, they believe this was intentional. I understand, a lot of the jury is still out about trying to define Russian motives, a hard thing to do, but ultimately the logic here, many say, suggests that you don't fly over 20 drones simply through a common navigational error into a NATO member's airspace. But that Trump statement doing an awful lot of work about how Trump really feels about this, trying to put it down to a Kremlin error, saying he's not happy, but then also saying he's not happy about having anything to do, it seems, with this notion of bolstering European security. And I think that may be, in the long run, what Moscow is aiming for, trying to find a moment where the US desire to honor its part in NATO is diminished, and then testing their capacity to defend their airspace with this remarkable incursion. Civilian homes damaged, so let's not forget. And then now NATO moving forwards with this response, a bid to show cohesion and upscale in their capabilities. How much it necessarily changes, though, in terms of Moscow's thinking, we'll find out in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, and, I was speaking to the Latvian president, Nick, just 2 days ago, and this is something that the president was calling for. This is something that he wanted to see from NATO. They want to see stepped up, something that, as you have said to me before, they've all been warning about. How do you think this will be received, this bolstering of the posture in the eastern flank? How do you think this will be received by Moscow?
Look, I mean, ultimately, Russia, I think everyone I've spoken to over the days on this thinks it's unlikely Russia won't try something like this again. And the bigger question is, how do you change their thinking? This may have been a probe designed to see how far they could potentially get, what sensitive targets in Poland they might be able to fly near. And they may have felt they've seen some success. I mean, what we're seeing here is a statement of extra defensive capability from NATO and extra unity, they say, but no actual response that might harm Russia back. Not that any harm was necessarily caused to NATO member human civilians during this particular incursion. So I think Russia will look at this as possibly a lesser response from NATO. They'll be very interested in exactly what Trump has said. He's been on Fox News this morning in an appearance that made a lot of news, but also part of that was saying that time is running out fast for Vladimir Putin. It's running out very fast, and suggesting that the next wave of sanctions, which I should remind you, he said he put in place on Sunday, or was ready to put in place on Sunday, and we've seen no actual practical steps yet. He said the next sanctions might involve the Russian banking sector and more secondary tariffs on those who buy Russian oil. But still, everybody you speak to is waiting for the White House to respond.
Yeah.
This yet another escalation over the past week. Remember, we had the attacks on Kiev, a record assault against Ukraine, 24 pensioners killed in a single airstrike in Yarovo in Donetsk on Monday, and then Wednesday, the incursion against Poland. So an exceptionally busy week in terms of Russia moving forwards with this aggressive posture. And still, I think many in Europe wondering quite when the White House steps in with a move it's been advertising for weeks.
Indeed, ever-shifting timelines and no follow-through. Nick, appreciate it. Thank you very much.